you have to give props where props are due. Or you can say credit where credit is due. Doesn't necessarily matter who the person is. You got to give credit where credit is due. One of the things that I had this, I don't know what's the word for it. That's a sweet spot. There was this kind of great feeling associated with it when I saw the left close ranks on Ilhan Omar. Understand what I mean? Oftentimes we have these kind of warring tribes, and on the left we tend to go after each other. Oftentimes it's, I believe the world should look this way, and this guy's deviating from it in this very particular degree, and I'm going to go after him for deviating for it on a degree. But for the overarching majority of it, especially in compared to other people within your political system, those guys are still on your side. I often said they are my sandbox, even though we might bump heads and I might do videos attacking them, despite them being in my sandbox. In this one particular case, Sam Seder's work wife, Michael Brooks, has a debate with a gentleman. I can't get his name. I didn't hear his name mentioned here, but they mention him, but it's hard to hear what they're saying. It's unclear. But the guy is a smear merchant going after Ilhan Omar. They're on Israeli television. At least that's what it says on Michael Brooks's clip. And Brooks eats this guy alive. Eats him alive to such a degree where I had a hard time even figure out what his argument was. I mean, basically it's, I don't like Ilhan Omar saying this. And Michael Brooks kind of brings it down to, she was critiquing the lobby. Michael Brooks was making the same argument I was making the entirety of the time. She's critiquing the lobby. She's critiquing the lobby. And are you saying that she can't critique a lobby without you guys screaming anti-Semitism? And not just that, it does a disservice to real anti-Semitism when you guys are using this in order to shut down criticism of Israel. A state, like any other state. Hats off to Michael Brooks. Michael Brooks beat the stuffing out this guy. Take a listen to this, because I want you to see how absolutely and completely Brooks eviscerates him. And why this is not something, I said before, they jumped the shark. They were pushing on this issue, and Ilhan just so happened to have a ton of people to back her up. And in backing her up, opened up an actual conversation on Israeli policy from the left. Like this is a big deal. Like, from the standpoint of my lifetime, this is unfamiliar to me. Hats off to Michael Brooks.
Yeah, this was a victory, you would acknowledge, for progressives and perhaps something of a setback for staunch supporters of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. But, you know, problematic in a number of ways. And I think perhaps what it was the first sign of is what Bret Stephens called today the Corbynization of the Democratic Party.
Pause it.
This is something that...
At this point, I'm already like, fuck you. Was in the debate.
The party stands for. This is not the historic nature of what the Democratic Party stands for, and I think it's a great shame and tragedy that somebody like Ilhan Omar, who is an overt anti-Semite, can hold the Democratic Party by the kahunas, as they say.
I'm going to be intervening into this, so just saying in advance. First and foremost, just because a party stands for something in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's going to always stand for it in the future. Understand what I'm saying here. You have a party that stands for slavery. Is that party going to stand in slavery for perpetuity because it stood for it once when the polarities of the party were a particular thing? Parties change. If there's any constant in our politics, parties change, and sometimes they should change. On this very particular issue, it should change. There is a brutal occupation going on, and both parties, for the most part, have this bipartisan consensus that we don't say anything about this, hands off. Simultaneously, though, we will criticize other nations that is doing something similar. Just because a party was something in the past doesn't mean it would always be something in perpetuity. It doesn't mean it always should be something in perpetuity.
Michael?
Well, I just want to note, first of all, you're always at a bit of a disadvantage. Maybe we should rewind it a little bit because everybody, he mispronounced it, is how dismissive.
By the kahunas, as they say.
Michael?
Well, I just want to note, first of all, you're always at a bit of a disadvantage when you're up against an accent. So I just want to have that noted in the playing field. But let's be real here. I mean, there was one group that wasn't included in that resolution, and that was the Palestinians as a people, where regular racism and dehumanization towards them is entirely accepted. The reality is that Ilhan Omar is correct on the merits. She's correct on the policy. Saying that she said this comment about dual allegiance is a great leap to begin with. And I have to say, I find it extraordinary that people on the right, who sometimes accurately, by the way, not always, but sometimes accurately, say people on the left, jump to accusations too quickly of various bigotries and read into things. They've been reading into every single thing that the Congresswoman has said from the beginning, most of which are substantive critiques of a sovereign nation state that happens to administer a horrific regime that violates people's rights on a daily basis in Gaza, the West Bank, and even inside Israel in some respects. The new indictment about Netanyahu isn't just garden variety corruption. It involves actually undermining democracy. So I support Ilhan Omar. I don't buy, and I also, in fact, support Corbyn, in fact. And the reality is that these things are going to become debated on the merits. And we're not going to have a false equivalency and actually drag down the profoundly serious issue of anti-Semitism by equating it with all criticism of a sovereign nation state that administers apartheid in reality.
Look, I think this is...
I forgot to say, as...
You know what, let's
you're not going to do...
That was brutal. That was completely brutal. He just leaves the guy in flames. It's like, it's a fire hydrant. Fucking A, Michael Brooks. Let's keep going. There's more to this. Because everything Michael Brooks said, it was right. She criticizes Israel as a lobby. And in the critique of Israel as a lobby, AIPAC as a lobby, saying that this lobby is spreading money around because lobbies spread money around. It is a lobby. It is exactly what it does. It would be weird if you said this lobby didn't represent the interests of Israel. Otherwise, what would be the point of it? Seeing as it's a lobby, and that's what lobbies do. I don't have anything to add to what Brooke said here. This was spot on. Okay, I'm lying. I do have a little something to add. If you remember, she made a tweet. And from that tweet, they inferred all of this stuff, this disingenuous stuff, in order to obfuscate from the main issue of her tweet, which was specific and spot on. I don't know. All of this has been just somewhat amazing. And I don't think you do Israel a disservice in doing this. Because understand, this conversation is only taking place because they pushed so hard in attacking this woman. So let's have a conversation. Let's have a debate.
Hear somebody sit here and speak like this. I mean, a recent poll came out that only 24% of British people do not consider Corbyn to be an anti-Semite.
Well, you guys have done an effective job. But let's focus on Omar. You've done a great job.
Let's focus.
Corbyn. You're not going to do this to Congresswoman Omar.
Focus on her. Don't worry.
Let's do that. Let me try to do that. Let's try to do this, and let me set this up. Let's focus on Omar.
Because this is important. This is really important.
And one of the issues, David, that she has argued is, and look, we can agree that maybe she was sloppy, maybe she got too close to an anti-Semitic trope, but as far as the actual policy is concerned, you mentioned a minute ago that the Democrats are engaged in something radical. Is it radical to criticize the Netanyahu government in Israel for the settlement policy in the West Bank?
Let's be clear about something, okay? And this is what's incredibly disingenuous about what you've just heard here. That is absolutely not what she is being accused of by people on the right and by members of her own party, the leadership of her own party. She is somebody who has accused Israel of hypnotizing the world.
That
has
was
accused
a 2012 tweet, which she has already backtracked
Excuse
on.
me, I let you speak.
Right, don't touch me.
Let me finish, please.
Sure.
Excuse me.
He was touching me a lot.
She has accused supporters of the Jewish state of being motivated by money, and she has
Every
accused,
lobby plays a role in politics. That's reality.
The largest pro-Israel Jewish organization.
Right, and that's a resolution condemning her for that. But again, to my question, is it radical to criticize the Netanyahu government for their settlement policy in the West Bank?
That's not what this discussion is about.
That's absolutely what this discussion is about.
Is it radical? It's not.
This discussion is about the role of lobbies.
But that is not what this discussion is about. That's not what Ilhan is about. The power of lobbies. That's not what she's being criticized before.
This discussion is about money in politics. This discussion is about foreign policy in the Middle East. Also, Ilhan Omar has been a robust critic of Saudi Arabia. She said people should boycott.
By the way, something Michael Brooks is doing here that he should get commended for. The other guy is making all of this hoopla. It's like, wait. But he's not actually really saying anything of substance. I mean, ultimately, he's repeating the same point. Michael Brooks is continually bringing this back to the main original point. She criticized a lobby for and Israel's role in a brutal occupation. That's what she did. And Michael Brooks continuously brings it back to that very specific point, regardless of all the bluster and the hoopla that this guy makes. Wait. No, let's get back to the original point. She's criticizing that government, a state, like any other state. Nothing to do with any racist tropes or any anti-Semitic tropes. She's criticizing that state. Is it anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli state? That's what Michael Brooks is making a point on. And of course, the answer to that is no.
Boycott the Hajj because of Saudi Arabia's conduct. The reality is that the old stagnant frames of both the sort of Saudi and Israeli consensus is being undermined and disrupted and critiqued in a robust way, which is oriented on global human rights standards and not, in fact, ethnocentric identity politics, which is a problem wherever it manifests. And the smearing of her, the lies about her, the disgusting, grotesque display against her you just saw is only going to strengthen people's commitment.
I didn't realize I did this, but it's visually kind of funny. Just go back just like a few seconds. Don't worry about certain niceness about
politics, which is a problem wherever it manifests. And the smearing of her, the lies about her, the disgusting, grotesque display against her you just saw is only going to strengthen people's commitment.
But can you understand why a lot of people who support Israel, they may criticize the Netanyahu government, feel that Israel constantly gets singled out by people on the Democratic left in a way that is unfair compared to the rest of the world?
I've heard this argument also, and someone has even been on this channel and made this argument to me. And I will say now what I said then because I think it's absolutely true. If this country, our responsibility, or it is our responsibility to keep a wraps on what your government does. It's almost like your Frankenstein monster. You decided to come together and create a government. Great. Your responsibility is to make sure that government remains, let's say, associated with the wants of the public itself. Meaning that it doesn't get away from you. Now, if your country is spending billions of dollars to support a brutal occupation, do you like that or not? And if you don't like that, don't you have some responsibility with regards to that occupation? I mean, after all, this is your government. These are your tax dollars. The policies of the United States government is being done in your name. Don't you have somewhat of a larger responsibility to ensure that what it's doing in your name is not utterly grotesque? This relationship that the United States has with Israel to some degree, the reason I'm critical of this, I'm critical of the other regimes around the world also, but I'm also critical of this because of the amount of money and resources we dump into the country itself. It creates a tether, in a sense. It creates almost a responsibility that what it does and what it's doing in my name, in our collective names, that is not something that's, like I said, utterly grotesque. That's our responsibility. That's why Israel gets criticized more in this sense. It's not that they're being picked on. It's that if you're getting billions of dollars from us, I would prefer that those billions of dollars are not used to make people's lives miserable. And in this case, we're talking about the Palestinians.
So in terms of reality, let's break this down. Number one, there is, first of all, if Israel wants to be held to a higher standard than a place like Saudi Arabia, it's going to be held to a higher standard. When people say, well, why don't you complain about the Saudis? First of all, everybody does, and the Saudis at least don't have any pretensions that they're anything other than a brutal theocracy and monarchy. The Israelis have maintained a position of being the only democracy in the Middle East, while they have maintained an occupation of another group of people for over 40 years and regularly killed and bombed civilians. And the second standard is that, look, again, in terms of reality, Israel has not only serious and profound and systemic problems, which even poses a threat in some respects to our security, but like Egypt, we happen to fund them greatly. And so therefore, it is a different relationship. But you will find that those who criticize Israel in good faith, as many Jewish activists do, of course, are going to be actually the same people, as you see with Omar, who are questioning the relationship with the Gulf monarchies and other areas of dysfunction in Middle East policy that will never be wrong, no matter how many lies and smears people throw at her.
You know, we can have a long discussion about Middle East policy.
Pause it.
But what you...
This is where he's lost it. This is where he's lost fun, whatever else is watching. Use
Middle East policy. But what you have seen tonight is disingenuity at the highest level.
I agree.
This is
Michael Brooks added that I agree. He says, this has been so disingenuous. Well, yeah, I guess you would say that when you have nothing else to offer. Everything Michael Brooks said is absolutely true. And he's being concise, to the point, and he is eviscerating this guy's argument. It's like, what is it to stand there knowing that you have no argument in order to push back against what is being thrown at you? I mean, Michael Brooks has hit this guy in the face over and over and over and over again. And the only thing he can just stand there and do is just take it as like, this is disingenuous. This is disingenuous. You keep hitting me in the face in this way. It's so disingenuous. Let's let him finish. Like I said, if you've noticed, there's nothing there. Like the problem is the anti-Semite trope that they've been screaming in this case. There's no there. She made a basic tweet that was very specific, and they jumped from the specificness of the tweet into an inference that they didn't care whether or not she actually was inferring. I mean, all of this was built on nothingness, a cloud of smoke. And Michael Brooks is just kind of blowing it away. And this guy who has to sit here and defend this has no weapons or device to which to stop Michael Brooks from attacking him. Good.
This is not what this discussion is about. This is not about policy. Please don't interrupt. I let you speak. Policy. I let you speak. Please don't interrupt.
And focus on policy.
Please don't interrupt.
Focus on
this
policy.
Is about a person.
The guy's smearing her. Like, Brooks is telling him, focus on policy. Because ultimately he's attacking her. He's smearing her. It's not so much that he said anything. When he opened up, he said, this woman is clearly anti-Semite. I don't know why it's clear to who. Maybe just clear to you. But ultimately, these have been just attacks directly on her. The policies itself that Brooks is bringing up. If you've noticed, you can rewind this video. There have been no pushback on. The most that he could say is, this is a problem, we shouldn't be having this conversation, etc., etc., etc. But at the end of the day, Brooks keeps telling him, focus on policy, stop smearing her, focus on policy. And of course, he can't do that. He can't do it.
Who has come into the United States Congress and repeated, as a repeat offender, bigoted tropes against the Jewish community. She's been called out from it across the board, from within the Jewish community, from within her own party. And the concern is...
people who agree with you, and look, there are plenty of people who do agree with you, and may say that, you know, what she did was unconscionable, but by playing it out the way it did, by hitting back so hard at Ilhan Omar, who doesn't seem like any sort of threat to Israel or people who support Israel, the Israeli right has essentially lifted her stature. She has more power now than she did a week ago.
But also, let's be clear, most people
about the
don't
Israeli
agree
right,
with her.
right? The criticism here is coming from across the political spectrum.
I'm sympathetic to people who are brought up in a particular culture or in a society that has an association with that culture. In which case, they hear somebody say that woman is anti-Semitic. And they themselves, because they are on a particular wavelength, accept it as true. Even though it's not true. I mean, part and point of the disingenuous yelling that this person is an anti-Semite, or like in Jeremy Corbyn's case, a fucking anti-Semite, is that there will be people out there, genuine, earnest people out there, who hears this and appropriates this as if this is reality. Not necessarily some political wranglings of somebody who just doesn't necessarily want to have a conversation on a particular topic. The goal of it is to shut down debate. And you have a lot of people out there who will hear this person is an anti-Semite and accept it. They're being genuine. They accept it, however. That doesn't necessarily change the fact that it's disingenuous. It doesn't change the fact that her criticism was specific. It doesn't change the fact that it is perfectly okay and legit to criticize a government, a state, just like you can criticize any state. You can criticize Kenya, you can criticize America, you can criticize Canada, you can criticize the policy of the UK, France. Pick a state, any state. All of them can be criticized. All of them are legal instruments. None of them have this right to exist, especially in the context of repressing another country from existing or preventing another country from existing. It's not that I'm arguing that it should not be there. I'm just arguing that any state, all states, there's no God-given right for any particular state to exist. To get back to the original point, I'm sympathetic to just regular people who only get a portion of what is taking place with regards to politics, and they accept this as being true. But again, just because somebody accepts something as being true, just because somebody feels a particular way, it doesn't necessarily make it true, or it doesn't necessarily make it reality. Just wanted to push back on that. You know, there's a lot of people out there condemning her, yeah, because they've done an awesome job smearing her, and not everybody pays close attention to politics.
And it's a very specific criticism. This is not criticism about discussion of Israel. It's criticism about repeating anti-Semitic tropes. And that's the charge of dual loyalty. That's the charge of being influenced by
which we don't
money,
accept that premise.
Right? And that's the charge of Israel hypnotizing the world.
And every single
These are the kind of tropes that you saw in Nazi propaganda.
This was definitely rude, but I saw the 1 minute warning without getting the last word.
His influence.
Hypnotizing the world,
and every single
these are the kind of tropes that you saw in Nazi
single
propaganda.
person is influenced by money from every single lobby. There's no magical exemption with AIPAC and.
Yes, I mean, come on. Of course that's true, right? You have 1,000 lobbies, and I'm just throwing a number out. 1,000 lobbies. If that lobby wasn't trying to get political influence, then what is the point of that lobby? If the oil and gas lobby is not spending money around, it's spending influence in order to get them to vote on bills that gives the oil and gas industry more money, more cash, more political favors, then what is the point of that lobby? I'm making the point that any lobby, all lobbies, pick a lobby, uses its influence, spreading cash around, because that's the currency in the United States, to buy influence. AIPAC is not magical in this case. It's working for the interests of Israel. There's no magical door that allows AIPAC to be a lobby and not work for the interests of Israel and still exist as a lobby. I mean, come on, let's just be honest.
And she's right.
Michael Brooks and David Effian, good to have you both on. Terrific discussion. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Shout out to Brooks on this. Shout out to Brooks on this. He did a badass job. He did an awesome ass job. He kicked ass. He kicked ass. I've criticized Brooks and Seder and all those guys. But you know, I make this point about the sandbox issue.
That was like a build
And
up
I
of years
consider
of arguments I've had
these
over dinner
guys
tables
in
about
my
it.
sandbox. Even though we may disagree sometimes on how to get from point A to point B or point A to point D, I felt some kind of way when everybody closed ranks for Omar. Honestly did. It felt like we were part of something larger than just our own little sandboxes. It felt like we were actually working almost in coordination for good ends, in defense of somebody who was being earnest and creating a larger conversation of Israel. I mean, for fuck's sake, they're passing an anti-BDS bill. Understand what that means. They're bastardizing the First Amendment in order to have charges on people who decide that they don't want to support a apartheid state. When people make this argument that they're pushing and buying influence, it has nothing to do with their Jewishness. This has everything to do with their being a lobby. And yeah, the lobby gets real gains. That BDS bill doesn't take place without influence being peddled in order to get that BDS bill in place. Even if it's struck down, the very act of these people willing to do this and willing to destroy all notions of the First Amendment in order to make this work is problematic and gets Omar, I don't want to keep calling her Ilhan's, but Omar's point that much more precisely. Like, the very act and the way in which they attacked her and the ferocity of their attacks makes her point that much more loudly than the original point that she made. So, I'm not going to keep this much longer. This one has gone 26 minutes. So, wow, there's very many people here. Alright, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. I have a few more videos for today that I want to get through that I didn't get a chance to go through during the week. So, I'll see you guys in a few. Thanks all.